Welcome to Lashback, everyone. I'm Natalyan.
And I'm Phoebe. And today we're going to be exploring the music industry today.
Absolutely. So I did a quick Google search as always. So how has the music industry changed? And just a very quick snapshot, and we'll chat about it, is that obviously the music industry has evolved over the decades from vinyl records to streaming services to how the industry has adapted to new technologies, but also how difference between artists and consumers, their demands are different, and business models for artists and how we receive our music is different.
Yeah.
So we can all talk about the things that we know have changed, but from a perspective of you, and obviously we've grown up through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, what's the big significant changes for you, both as an artist and a consumer?
Well, I mean, the business model has changed, doesn't it? So I think that's the biggest thing. There are some artists, the guys I loved in the 80s, I bought them on cassette, and then I bought them on CD. And then I bought the downloads. And now everyone's just streaming stuff. So there's a whole generation of artists that I paid 3 times for the recorded music. And now as a songwriter, I haven't got to it yet. I haven't even printed CDs or vinyl to sell. It's all kind of digital release. And obviously, I think that's the advent of the iPod and things like MySpace and the MP3 over the pressed vinyl master.
Yeah.
So, there's been a lot of changes. There's a lot of chat about it as well. I think the Music Union in the UK are currently lobbying Spotify to pay artists more fairly, to recognise the business model's change, but the songwriter still needs to get payment, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, I did, especially through COVID, a lot of touring artists that are, famous touring artists, but might not be, the famous touring artists from band members or guitarists or something. They suddenly lost their living. So they kind of got involved, which was great, but they should have got involved before. But I get it, because that was their main way of making money, more so than streaming. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but basically the model hasn't evolved correctly. So before they'd get a cut of each time a CD, for example, was sold. And rather than say like radio plays or something. So whereas Spotify, yeah, so you should be getting, because no one's purchasing anything anymore. No. And it's kind of a bit of a loophole that Spotify went through
Well, that's not true. That's not true. People are purchasing. They're purchasing their license for Spotify.
That's what I'm saying.
That's where the money's staying.
That's what I'm saying is that's where that's what I mean in terms of
but 10 quid a month. 10 quid a month on Spotify is way less than what I used to spend in our price on a Saturday morning.
Absolutely. So that's what I mean is that these providers are finding that loophole, saying actually they're not purchasing each record, so therefore we're not going to pay them that way, when in fact they should be paid that way. That's what I mean.
Yeah. And then, there's a lot of impact to that, the download versus the buying the album, to how people consume music. Like, when's the last time you listened to an album start to finish? Like you might have done if you got it on the vinyl player or you pressed it on the CD. Now you'll listen to, you'll have Spotify on shuffle or what have you, and not listen to a full body of work. And I think that's had an impact to how people are releasing music, how they're writing music. Everything's going to be a single, no B-sides, no all killer, no filler, as they say.
No secret songs, and also, just the secret songs were fantastic. And also music videos that promoted it. I mean, we used to, if you look at the movies of the 80s and 90s, they're famous just as much for their soundtrack as they are for the actual movie itself, which doesn't happen anymore. And music videos had a massive impact.
Musical.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So it's not soundtrack; it's the music within it, as opposed to the soundtrack. Like Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, all of those things. And it was such a big hoo-ha of getting the album for. And sometimes I'll be watching a movie and I'll hear a song in there that Shazam's not picking up, and I want to know it, and I can't find it because it's not. It might be so short in that movie that it's not considered part of the soundtrack.
the soundtrack.
I
Yeah.
think how we're listening to music is pretty similar to kind of TV watching. We've got so much choice now, which is such a good opportunity for people. But also, there's a downside to that people's attention spans are so small, and the market is just an influx of artists now.
What was that? I'm joking. It's
Funny,
true.
funny.
I mean, people make, the people that I know that make, all of their living out of music, they're making that money from live shows, gigs, covers gigs, and
Yep.
merchandise. Merchandise has long been where actually the better returns are, with or without a record deal. I mean, this might be controversial to say, and I'm quoting Sophie Daniels here, who's the program leader of my songwriting masters, who says, record companies are just banks. They give you the money and then they expect, repayment with investment. So
Yep.
you do see a lot more independent artists because they can release straight to market and build audience directly without needing to go through the machine that a record company is or was, and what that kind of offers. Although there's a lot of inequity in that as well, I think. I have a particular friend who doesn't even like to work with promoters. He'd much rather just book the venue and sell the tickets himself than have to share the money. And I know other people that love working with promoters and sending an invoice. So it's in a way, it's kind of like the business model that was is gone. And I think there's a lot of scrabbling around at the minute to try and understand what the ongoing business model is. And then a lot of campaigning around songwriters. I've been talking a lot recently about how, so we don't make the same money out of recorded music that we used to, but the sound engineer still gets paid and the players still get paid, and the songwriter's paying for all of that, but the songwriter's not going to be getting the royalties that they used to for having the publishing.
That's what I mean. It's not being updated. With the changes in technology and business models, there's been, again, the streaming services have been allowed to just slip in there, and with a new landscape for music, change their business model without actually following through to the artist. So that's what I mean by loophole. It's you have to have millions of streams to make any money.
That's not even money. It's like a little bit of money.
Well, that's what I mean. Livable money.
Yeah.
You couldn't just have songs out there unless you. So I think there's pros and cons. Again, this could be controversial, but going back to your point about the record company being a bank, that's absolutely right. We have more control now because they don't have the says when you're an independent artist. But the downsides of that is, the exposure and the global exposure and how you can quickly kind of get out
and the contacts that they have and radio playing and all of that sort of thing. So those sort of business relationships that might have supported an artist into bigger, that still exists for some people. I think Lola Young's an interesting one. She was working very hard. She's great, isn't she? She just played Coachella this year after going viral on TikTok. But before that, she'd done a lot of performing and a lot of developing of her sound. And
she went to the Brit School and she did.
She didn't try and go viral on TikTok.
Yeah,
she jumped on a thing that was already.
She met the right people as well. She was gigging a lot, and she did a BBC Kids TV show music thing as well.
Did she?
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called now.
It's interesting, these pathways, isn't it? The career pathways of what's happening now, like Billie Eilish, viral on SoundCloud, and then pretty much mainstream and supported within a big machine, but not like scouted by an A&R person like it might have been.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because having that structure, growing up, all it was getting a record deal, and I was so close so many times, and it's just so difficult to kind of be yourself and not do that, but it's a good way to get in there, like these 90s boy bands, and they're controlled, but they're just signing anything to just get in there, and then at some point they're going to break away and take control, and they'll be a bit older.
Or are they?
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of artists go, it's at least you're in there and you've got some presence. So I do think there's pros and cons, and everything has to evolve, but the problem is that it's evolved in one way but it's not evolved in another way. It's like you can't have all this online stuff without having rules, regulations, and policies around those things, just like social media. With you can't be allowed to bully someone in the street, but not be allowed to bully them in the street, but then be allowed to bully them online. Online, it's an evolution of how we talk to each other and we share things, and everything has to follow that. It shouldn't have been allowed to carry on this long with the likes of Spotify and everything. It's been
No, I mean,
a decade.
it's kind of like if we pose the question, how do you find out about new music? So back in the day, I mean, you'd go to the record shop and you'd see what the
miss
guys that
those.
are completely obsessed with records and look at it on finger on the pulse what they're putting on their front shelves or whatever. But before that, before recorded music, you'd only really know about it because you were buying the sheet music or because you would be catching it live. And all of those ways are pretty organic, aren't they? You know, there's that band that always play on a Friday night in that place, and we'll consume music that way. And I love that song. And I learn piano. We've got one in our front room, and I've got the sheet music, and now I learn that song, and the song becomes really famous, like The Entertainer, which I've learnt on piano and I learnt on clarinet. And
Everyone did in the
who wrote that song? You know, because it's in every single music lesson ever. And now we're like sort of like flooded with new songs that an algorithm is telling us, unless we're sort of more clued in and we're reading magazines or online mags or whatever. But for me also, I mean, coming across live music is normally the way I come across new music. So my musical sort of listening isn't at the moment so much about what doesn't come from not my community. I know loads of artists that are on the gig scene with me and they're releasing all the time. I listen to that. And then there's the odd song I come across on the radio or whatever.
I was just about to say, I've started in the last couple of years listening to radio again now, which I didn't for probably 20 years. And I think it's really important to not just have your own, because I found myself just listening to my music, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the same old.
Yeah, and it's like you're never going to explore new things. And that's how I found Lola Young as well, actually. And she's the first artist I've really has really affected me in a very, very long time. I'm quite addicted, actually. Lola, if you're listening, please comment.
Yes,
I am
quite
addicted, actually, in a really, in a good way. But I just think she's, very refreshing. And I resonate with a lot of what she talks about. I'm sure a lot of us do. And I just really like, that's my kind of music and how I kind of like to write. And that's really motivated me. But I do miss those you mentioned about record stores. I miss, you'd go with your mates to the HMV or whatever and you try it, or the local record store, and you say, what have you got? And as you said, they're on the pulse. The people that own the stores are on the pulse, right? They were like, oh, listen to this, that you'd never heard of. And it was a day event, wasn't it? I miss
at least the whole morning.
Yeah.
And then you'd go and sit in the pub or the cafe or whatever and talk about what you bought.
Or you could listen to them, couldn't you, in the stores? You could, especially the big HMVs, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
Or Virgin stores, I think, were key to bringing that out.
Try before you buy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's quite groundbreaking that I don't think people quite realise. That was a big deal. I watched a documentary about it where people would go in. It was unheard of.
Yeah.
So I think there's things I'm missing. Sorry, things we're missing there is that social interaction together, finding new music together as friends, I think.
Yeah, indeed. And the quality of music as well, like vinyl.
That's
just better quality.
You can't beat that crackle.
But also the depth of the sound. When something's streamed, the bass gets squished out of it. And in fact, when I was recording my last set of singles, part of the mixing conversations do come down to let's whack that bass up or follow that bass with another part, because when it's being listened to on the phone, that will be lost. Yeah, absolutely. So that's how songs are listened to and marketed, impacting the creative and recording process.
It's definitely changed with technology as well from a recording perspective, because back in the day when you pressed onto vinyl, each time you did it wrong, that's a vinyl gone. So you had to all play live.
Time as well.
Yeah, you'd have to all play live. Like I watched a documentary where Chic were doing it and they're like incredible, right? Or Mamas and Papas. Just incredible artists. And they'd all be in the room and they'd play. And if someone screwed up, you got to start again and you got to repress. So even just from that impact, where you,
They're
you know,
being
okay, I'll
better
fix
at
that.
it.
Yeah, otherwise I'll just fix it in the mix. No, no. So those harmonies
Rehearse it and
hang on.
perform it proper. Yeah,
Yeah, so you're
absolutely.
losing a lot there, you know.
There's
But there's,
so much, and this is such a developing, conversation within an industry. I mean, what is the music industry? It's big record labels, but it's also the open mic at the end of the road on a Tuesday,
yeah,
or
absolutely.
whatever.
Glad you
It's
said that.
or it's such a wide spectrum. It's community music. It's tribute bands. It's covers bands. It's stuff at your wedding. It's all sorts. So I think we can get a little bit hung up maybe on the big industry side of that, because there is
Absolutely.
industry, small I. And
Yeah,
music's so
beautifully.
important to people. Such a big topic. We could talk about this forever. But I wonder whether we should pause this discussion now,
I agree.
invite the listener to comment and contribute, and we'll pick it up again in the next round, maybe next series.
Absolutely. Yeah, comment everyone, and thanks for listening. This is a topic close to our hearts, so we'll be doing more of that and talking about what we do as artists as well. So please let us know, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
See you later.